All right, welcome back everybody. If this is your first time to the channel, welcome to Notes to Fret, where we are all about turning theory into riffs. And in this video, we are going to start our discussion on the 7th chords. 7th chords kind of being one of the first series of chords that, can be a little bit tricky for some students. So we are going to definitely take a few videos to talk about a lot with the 7th chords. But in this video, we are going to dive into the introduction of 7th chords. And really when we're looking at building out these 7th chords, we're going to start with the major and minor triads, and we're going to build up very cleanly from there. And what we're really looking at is the fundamentals of understanding and building out 7th chords, because once you understand this, when we get into the advanced stuff with, anything with diminished and augmented segments in the sevenths and working with different modes, it will all be very easy for you once you have these fundamentals. Additionally, by understanding really what's going on here, later on, it's going to give you so much room to start breaking all these rules, right? So when we're talking about music theory and, these kind of, I'll call them rules for lack of a better term, but it's not to confine you, it's to understand them so you can break out of them, right? And so I think you can really get creative with 7th chords. And so making certain that you understand the fundamentals of everything is really what this video is going to be about. So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump right into something we're all very familiar with, and that is our major triad. In this case, we're just looking at our C major, right? We've got that major third followed by a perfect fifth, and this is our major triad we're all very familiar with. All I'm going to be doing down here at the bottom with this musical notation is I'm just going to be showing you patterns. We're not learning how to read music in this series, so this is just patterns. And what we're looking at here is what we've seen before, right? This is just the triad. Stacked thirds along with perfect fifth. What I want to do now is add in the 7th. And the 7th of C is B. And so all we're doing, right, we're just pretty much looking at every other note in the scale right now. And if we're looking at B, going from G to B is a major third, or 4 frets. So we would say that B is a major third up from the perfect fifth. G being the perfect fifth, B is a major third up from that, or 4 frets up your fretboard, right? And if we look down at the musical tonality of it, we can see that we just pretty much put another dot right on top. Now, when we talk about this being when B is a major third from the fifth, well, from the root, B is a major 7th from the root, right? So when we look at this, we can kind of evaluate. How do you want to look at this? Stacked thirds, or do you want to look at it from a root to a major 7th, kind of like we're looking at root to a perfect fifth, or a major third over a minor third, however you want to look at chords. So I wanted to put them both up there for everybody, just, however you want to look at them. But down at the bottom, again, we can see the patterns of the stacked thirds. We see the perfect fifth to the right, and then we see that major 7th to the left. Really, it's just a 7th. You can't tell if it's major or minor right now, unless we have a flat or a sharp in there, but that's the pattern for a 7th. Now, you might be thinking, well, what about, a minor third or a minor 7th, right? How does that work out? So if I want to go from G to a minor third, well, I would have to flatten the B. And I'm no longer in the key of C, because we know that C doesn't have a B flat. So there's potential problem here. And, even if I go all the way out to the root and I want to say, okay, what's that root? Well, root, in this case C, to B flat is a minor 7th. So something's going on here, right? But the pattern is still the same. It's the 4 dots on top of each other. But depending on if that 7th is major or minor, something's going on as to whether or not I'm still in my key, right? So this 7th can definitely play with us, right? So when we're looking at this, the pattern, you might be thinking, well, shouldn't the pattern change? It doesn't, right? If you put a sharp or a flat in there, it's still the 4 dots. If you see these 4 dots, you know that you are in a 7th chord. And it looks identical for a minor as well, right? So just wanted to kind of point that out. And speaking of the minor, that's what I want to jump into now. What about our minor triads, right? We've got a minor third and a perfect fifth. How does the seventh work out from there? Well, since we're already talking about minors down here, I'm just going to go down that minor path first. And if we look at E to G, well, that is, in fact, a minor third, right? It's 3 frets on our fretboard. So we could say that G is a minor third up from the perfect fifth, right? Perfect fifth being E. E to G is a minor third, or 3 frets. Well, if we look at that from the root, from A to G, that's a minor seventh, right? So we could say that that's a minor seventh up from the root. Again, however you want to look at chords, right? It depends on you. In this series, we'll talk about it from a minor seventh perspective, but if you're more comfortable with stacked thirds, here it is, right? Well, just as we looked at it with the major triad, with the minor triad, we may say, okay, well, we understand that the minor works out great, right? Minor seventh is a G, and G is in A minor. But what if I wanted to go from E to G, but I wanted to make it a major third? Well, all of a sudden I have to make that a G sharp. And you might be thinking, okay, well, if I go from the root to G and I want to make that a major seventh, well, I'm still at G sharp, right? And so here, as we're talking about these sharps and these flats, something is going on with sevenths because we're exiting out of our keys just by using major and minor triads. We're not even talking about diminished triads or augmented triads, just using major and minor, all of a sudden we can get out of key. So we got to be careful there. And what I want to do now is jump into understanding these intervals and what we're really truly looking at to really fundamentally understand what we talk about when we talk about this additional minor or major third and what kind of impacts it really has on us. So here, again, we're going to look at our major seventh, right? We just have that additional major third, and this is our C major scale or C major chord, and we're just going to add that seventh to it, right? So we've got the major third and the perfect fifth, no problem. And we want to verify that from E to G is in fact our major triad. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to look out to the third, right? C to E, that's 4 frets or 2 whole steps, major third. So far, so good. Then we're going to go from our third to our fifth, which is E to G, and that's 3 more frets. So we got our perfect fifth. Good. Good to go. We know that we have a major triad. Now what we need to do is look at G to B. Well, from G to B, we have 2 whole steps or 4 more frets, and that brings us up 11 frets, and that is a major seventh, right? Because that major third from G to B brings us all the way out to a major seventh. Now, if we look at the notes in this major seventh chord, right, pretty straightforward, just every other one, stacked thirds. And so what you're going to hear is a major triad with a major third, or a major triad with a major seventh, or a major triad and a major seventh, some derivative of these statements. And what that is giving us is a major seventh. Right, in this case, we're looking at C major seventh. And the way that you'll see this notated in all the musical books and any literature that you read, it's going to be annotated simply with major abbreviated and seventh, right? So this C major seventh is a major triad with a major seventh, or an additional major third, however you want to look at it. And as we were talking about it earlier, right, we wanted to say, okay, let's explore this minor seventh a little bit, right? Are we stuck to major sevenths with this additional major third, or can we have a minor seventh with a major triad? Well, we looked at this earlier and we said, well, that's a B flat. You can't do that because clearly in the key of, C, there is no B flat. So you'd be out of key. Well, it just means that the C, E, G, B combination doesn't work out. But let's try a different location in the scale. In this case, we'll start with the dominant, which we know is G major. All right, so we have a G major triad. We'll verify that. Remember, as I'm doing my my counting for the intervals, we're just going to have to loop back around. But if we talk about G to D, right, that's a perfect fifth, and we have this B in the middle, major third. Let's verify everything, right? So G to B, we've got 2 whole steps or 4 frets, which we know is a major third, so we're good there. And we talk about B to D, we've got a half step and a whole step, 3 more frets. So perfect fifth, good to go. We have a major third, or a major triad, no problem. Now, let's go from D to F, our fifth to our seventh. Well, that's only 3 frets, so that is a minor seventh. So this works out perfectly well, right? When we look at the notes of this chord, no problem. And so what we have is we have a major triad plus a minor third, or a major triad with a minor seventh, or a major triad and a minor seventh. Again, you're going to hear some derivative of this. And what this chord is called is the dominant seventh. And the reason it's called the dominant seventh is the only way to construct this pattern without going out of key is to construct it from the major scale at the dominant position. Therefore, it's called the dominant seventh. So this drove me crazy forever, and I'm talking years. Because even when we move into A minor, the G is at the 7th position in the key of A minor, or the A minor scale, however you want to look at it for this conversation. And yet it's still called the dominant 7th, in spite of the fact that it's not at the dominant position. That just drove me crazy. But again, the reason it's called the dominant 7th is because this pattern with the major triad and a minor 7th, the only way to construct it and stay in key is from the dominant position of the major scale. So therefore, dominant 7th. And here, we are looking at the G dominant 7th. And the way that this is going to be notated in all your musical books is just with the 7th, right? Whatever chord it is, G7, A7, B7, C7, whatever it is, this is your dominant 7th, okay? And so therefore, in the major scale, when you're looking at the 7th chords, you're going to have your first as a major 7th, your fourth as a major 7th, and your fifth as a dominant 7th, okay? And so here we got our C major 7th, our F major 7th, and our G dominant 7th, okay? I didn't go over the fourth. Good exercise. Don't take my word on it. Go verify that it is, in fact, F major 7th, right? Good exercise. But here's your 7th chords in the major scale. Now, what I want to do is jump into our minor scale, and we'll still use A minor, so any sharps or flats will jump out at us immediately. And here we're still going to be talking about the major and minor 7ths, right? That's what we're going to be going after. So here we got A to E, perfect fifth. We got C in between, minor third. Let's verify everything. So we go from A to C. Well, we've got 3 frets, or a whole step and a half step. That's a minor third. So far, so good. Then we have from C to E, which is 2 whole steps, or 4 more frets, perfect fifth. Cool. We verified that we are definitely starting off with a minor triad, in this case, A minor. And from here, we're going to go from E to G, which is a half step and a whole step, which is 3 more frets. So that brings us out to our minor 7th. And we saw this a little while ago. This worked out perfectly well, right? We added in, or we put in an additional stacked third, in this case a minor third, and that gave us a minor 7th. So we have A to C, a minor third, A to E, a perfect fifth, and A to G, a minor 7th. No problem, right? And so what you're going to hear is a minor triad with a major third, or plus a minor triad with a minor third, or a minor triad and a minor 7th, a minor triad with a minor 7th. Again, some derivative of this. And what that's going to give you is a minor 7th. In this case, we're looking at A minor 7th, okay? And the way you're going to see this in, again, all your musical books, the way that it's going to be written out, is just A lowercase m and then the 7th, right? Now, by the way, the 7th being lower here is just the font that I'm using. You just write it on the same line. But this is the notation for a minor 7th chord, okay? Now, we verified this, no problem. Minor triad with a minor third, good to go. But we also want to talk about the major 7th with our minor triad, right? We looked at the major triad with the major and minor 7th. We need to do the same here, right? But we're starting here with the minor triad. So we looked at this a little while ago and said, well, G sharp, that doesn't cut it, right? Because obviously G is not sharp in this scale. So in order to stay in scale, we're saying, nope, that just isn't going to work. Well, conventional wisdom would say, okay, well, remove the sharp and just realize that A, C, E, and G, that combination might not work. But let's look at another minor chord in the minor scale and see if we can get that major third out there so we can get a major seventh, right? I'm gonna forego discussion of the diminished in this video. So we're just gonna move directly into our D. And we know that D is a minor chord, right? That we can see it right here, and we've looked at this before. So all we really need to do is evaluate the distance from our fifth, in this case A, to our seventh, in this case C. So what we're looking for is that major third, right? So does A to C, does that distance, does that give us a major third? Well, if we look at A to C, that's a whole step followed by a half step. That's only 3 frets. So that's a minor third. Well, so that doesn't work. Okay, that doesn't work out. Let's then evaluate our next minor, because D minor didn't really work out, right? So let's move into our next one. Here, we're looking at E minor, and that's our dominant position. We saw something unique happen last time in the major scale with the dominant, so maybe the same thing will happen here. Who knows? Again, we know that E is minor, but all we need to do now is evaluate the distance from B to D, right? Our fifth to our seventh. And if that's a major third, we're good to go. But when we look at B to D, once again, it's a half step followed by a whole step, which is 3 frets. So that's a minor third. Well, that doesn't work out. So now we're kind of looking at this, and we've exhausted all of our minor triads, right? Our A minor, our D minor, and our E minor. And none of them had this major third. Well, the reality is, in the minor scale, or the minor sevenths of the key, there is no combination that keeps you within the key or within the scale that has a major seventh or this final major third. It doesn't happen. So therefore, it's much easier. All the sevenths of the minor scale that are based off minor triads, well, it's easy. They're all minor sevenths, every single one of them. So regardless if it's the first, the fourth, or the fifth, right? In this case, A, D, or E, well, A minor seventh, cool. D minor seventh, no worries. Or E minor seventh. Pretty straightforward, right? So that's pretty much the gist of it. Just to kind of do a recap on it. If we're looking at the major triads going into 7th chords, you got to be careful because we can get out of key just by using major and minor intervals, right? We're not talking about diminished or augmented intervals yet at all. And all of a sudden we can get out of key just using major and minor. So that, that can get you in a little bit of trouble if you're not paying attention. So keep that in mind. Additionally, yes, sevenths are just an additional stacked third, but we can see very quickly where, as we start to expand out our chords, we can run into some issues with looking at them in such a simplistic manner, right? The order of the thirds, you got a major third over a minor third. That gives you your major triad. And then if you have an additional major third on top of that, that's your major seventh, okay? Or if you do a minor third on top of your major triad, that gives you your dominant seventh, okay? And again, we talked about the dominant just working out from the dominant position of the C major scale. Next, we need to kind of look at the order, however we want to talk about it, right? Because we talked about the additional major third or minor third, but here we talk about the major third and the perfect fifth, right? That gives us our major triad. And here in this channel, I'll always talk about the major seventh, right? So if we have that major triad, major seventh, that gives us our major seventh chord, or we have that major triad with a minor seventh, that gives us our dominant seventh chord, right? So again, you just gotta, just depending on how you want to look at it, but here I will talk about chords in the fashion of major thirds or minor thirds, perfect fifths, minor sevenths, major sevenths, something along those lines, right? So just want to, in case anybody's out there who looks at it from strictly a stacked third perspective, right? It's just understanding that here I will be talking a lot about the major minor seventh perspective. But we need to look at the minor triads as well, right? That's just an additional stacked third, but as we saw, even with minors, we got to be careful, right? Because just by changing up between a minor seventh or a major seventh, we can get out of key pretty quickly. And when we're looking at the minor triads in the minor scale, well, they're all minor sevenths, right? There's nothing fancy. If we're staying in key, if we're staying in the scale, there's nothing here. They're all minor sevenths, right? Here, like we were talking about, a minor third, a perfect fifth, and a minor seventh. That's all your triads for your minors, right? Now, here we're talking about chords in this whole video series. This was the first one in the series of 7th chords. We're really going to be building on these. But what we've looked at so far, if any of this went over your head when we were talking about triads, we've spoken about that in the past. So there's a video out there. Highly encourage you to go look at that if the triads are throwing you or causing any confusion for you, because we have covered that. Additionally, we've looked at triads, voicings, voice leadings. We've looked at the inversions of triads, and inversions with sevenths are going to get real interesting. It's cool stuff there. Chord progressions, we looked at that as well. And here we are starting our intro on 7th chords. And again, from the 7th chords, there's going to be quite a bit that needs to be covered with that. So there are going to be a few videos on 7th chords. But anyways, with that being said, really appreciate everybody sticking around and watching this one. Let me know down in the comments if you have any questions or any other topics that you'd like to see me cover. I've heard from quite a few of you about the length of the videos. I want to make certain that I get all the information in there. So I can't ever see myself doing a 5-minute video. But working on these, maybe I'll break these up, shorter ones, make it shorter and give you a little bit of time to digest something and bring out a shorter video. Maybe I'll throw in some shorts here and there. Let me know down in the comments what you think might work for you. But again, really appreciate everybody sticking around watching the videos. And let me know what you're getting out of these, right? It's free. If you're getting something out of these, let me know. Give me a thumbs up. Huge appreciation on that. And also, huge help to the channel. If you're watching these and you haven't subscribed yet, again, it's free. Smash that subscribe so you are immediately notified when new videos are coming out. But with all that being said, again, really appreciate it, everybody. And we will see you next week when we continue our conversation about building out on some more of the advanced concepts with 7th chords. All right? Take care, everybody.